So today we are going to start our next lecture. And in this lecture, we are going to discuss about the cloud computing, especially about laying the groundwork. We divide this chapter into the two parts. The first part is about the authentication, authorization, verification, identification, and other things which are related to the cloud computing access matters, or we can say which are related to the cloud security matters. And then the second part is goes for the different type of the computing. There we can see what are the different type of the computing possibilities, or ways, or procedures are actually there with the cloud computing. So we will start with the first part today, where we will be discussing about the authentication mechanism. And you will be able to see that how the authentication mechanism is different from the normal authentication mechanism what we have in our daily routine life, or what we have the normal authentication mechanisms for our personal machines or official machines as well. It is different because of the multiple reasons. The most importantly is that the cloud is the place, or the data center is the place which does not hold or store the data for any one particular person, individual, or any one particular organization. Normally, it stores a great number of data for the different individuals and for the different organizations as well. And some of the time, the data what it is stored on the cloud, it is from the different geo locations as well. So its security or its access is highly critical. It is not like the access of the individual machines or individual servers or the machines that we are using in our offices as well. That's why the security mechanisms are also different here in the form of the cloud. So we will discuss the different aspects of the authentication, and we will try to understand the difference among them, and we will try to understand that what is the authentication, verification, validation, and what are the different means type of the authentication mechanisms that are being used by the cloud or on the cloud, how these things are being managed, and how these things are important for the cloud centers, for the individuals, and for the organizations as well. That will be the first part of our chapter, that what we will be discussing today. And the second part of the chapter is about the computing, that how many different sources are the forms of the computing, and how and which services cloud is providing to us, and how they are different from each other, and the rest of the details that probably we will discuss second part in our second lecture. So here we go. That our lecture outline are actually the authentication and then computing concepts. And after the computing concepts, there are the hardware virtualization. Hardware virtualization, which means actually VM concept. And then the fourth one is about the web development technologies. So these are the actually four pillars which actually contain for this particular chapter, but we will be focusing mainly about the authentication because that is the one which is the most important for this, and then the computing concepts, hardware virtualization, and web development. They are equally important, but those we will be covering in the later section. Now, when we go for the authentication, then we will discuss the different terminologies and we will try to understand critically that what is the difference among them and how they are interlinked with each other as well. So, with our today's chapter, we will be discussing about different things, and once you will be completing this chapter, you will be able to have the topics that what you have learned, you will be able to learn about to distinguish between the technology components and what they offer in making decisions about which cloud provider and product to choose. Now this is very comprehensive that which product you are going to choose, because you remember that the last time we discussed about the services. So we know that while we are going to choose about the services, we need to consider the several different parameters or factors. So we discussed about the several factors in our previous class, but at that time we didn't discuss about, or we discussed a very bit about the security or access or authentication or the computing or other things that what we are going to discuss them today. Because selecting a cloud for our organization or for our company is highly important. We cannot ignore even any one of the parameter because each one of them is highly important and that can have the direct impact on our decision to be choose. So this is actually aligned with the MLO1. MLO1 is actually to demonstrate the knowledge of the concepts, theory, and principles of the cloud computing. So in this, we are understanding about the principles and theories about the cloud computing. So this is how this is interlinked with your MLO1. Now, when we go ahead, so we can see that in that particular part where we start the first portion, that is about the authentication. Now, authentication is highly important, not only in the cloud, but this is highly important in each and every domain of our life, on an individual basis, on SME basis, on organizational basis, or on the joint setup, or even on the government setup basis. And this authentication is the one of the pillar of the security. So if we have the authentication, which is not actually means up to date, not up to the required standards, then it means that our resources, our assets, our products, they will not be safer, even though they are working fine. They don't have any issue in the code. They don't have issue in other ways, but there will be an issue that can be compromised, and that will become a huge issue. So that's why in security, the authentication is the major principle. We maintain what we mean by the major principle. You can understand it in this way that the security we can manage or maintain using the authentication mechanism. So now here we need to understand what is the authentication, what is the verification, what is the identification, what is the authorization, and then we will be able to understand the different patterns or different types of the authentication and how they can help us to maintain and manage the security of our systems, or how they can help us to manage the security of the clouds. It is very important as we discuss, because we are discussing about these security methods, our authentication, our authorization, everything related to the cloud. It means we are not discussing about something which is actually in general for any organization or for individual, but for the cloud. So what we mean here when we say the general or any machine, this is something very strong message here, because in our organization, the people involved, maybe the number is below 100 or below 1,000 or in few thousands. But when we talk about the cloud, then the number goes not in hundreds, not in thousands, but the probability is that it may goes the number of the users or the number of the people to whom the data belongs, maybe in millions as well, and also from the different organizations. And in case of the individual users, maybe from the different locations, from the different parts of the world as well. So this is why this is crucially important. And that's why we are managing and maintaining the authentication, authorization, validation, verification, and means all of the security other parameters as well, very differently from the normal practices what we have for the different servers or for the different machines. Now, when we reach here, so anybody can understand that actually what is the authentication. So authentication, to understand the authentication well, we have to understand the few things which are highly important, which can help us to understand exactly that what is the authentication. Now, you can see from here that there are the several points which are related to the authentication. So normally we consider that authentication is something, it's only the one, but it is not only the one, but it is a very detailed, means what we can see, and it has the several means components. So we are supposed to manage and maintain them. Then only we will be able to get the means 100% are the required authentication. So from this, you can see, if I just make a mouse pointer for you, so it will be easy for you to understand. So you can see from here that this is the authentication. Number one, what we are saying, that it is the authentication is a process of verifying that the user are who they are. What it mean? It means that this is the only mechanism where we can verify that whoever the user who is trying to enter, who is trying to log in, and whoever he is claiming that who am I, so that is the same user. So like suppose how we are making it sure, for example, I'm claiming that I want to log in with the name of Zaman. So it means I have to provide my authentication. So in the authentication, it need to be verified that either really an actual I am the Zaman or not. Okay. So how we are going to do this, we will discuss it in with the examples in the upcoming slides, and most probably we are doing this so you are aware about that. Otherwise, no issues. We're just going to explain it right in a couple of minutes. Then what's the next? The next is actually that a user must authenticate himself or herself before accessing any resources. Now, this is the step. This is also linked with the part of the authentication. But this is the part of the process where we mention to the user, if suppose if any of the user means want to access any resources, so user has to, means himself or herself, authenticate that they are the right user. We can get an example, like suppose you are coming for the class. Okay, so you are supposed to means make sure you are verifying that you are the one who really registered for that particular class. Then only you will be able to access to that particular class. Or say, for example, another example, if you are living in a condo and then the security people are there, they need to verify, they need to authenticate you that you are really the one who you are claiming yourself, and that is the part of that condo. So then they can actually allow you. So once you can enter, then you can be able to use the different resources for that particular part. So this is how we can see again that this is the means procedure part of the procedure, that how we can manage or maintain the authentication. So from here you can see now that authentication is not a something, one thing, only a one definition, but it is actually something which has the several components or the several parts, and further we can divide that as well into the different parts. So you can see that how and what we mean by that, that how we can going to divide them and how these things are with the means upcoming couple of minutes. So now you can see from the third point that what we are mentioning here in the third point, that the authentication is the primary method for restricting the access to application and data. So the authentication is the only we can call a primary method. Means this is the way, basic way, this is the basic method. With the help of this, we can means control the access of the users from any particular resources. Okay, so you can say that this is the gateway in the security where we can authenticate any person, and then after that we can means give them the permissions or not, whatever the criteria is. Those criteria we can discuss in the later. So we can discuss, we can see that what is the importance of the authentication. Now the fourth point, which is what it is mentioning, it says that when we choose the cloud service providers, we need to ensure that they have the appropriate authentication measures in place. This is the most important part now here. Now, up to this, we were just discussing that what is the authentication, how it is happening. Based on the authentication, we can verify someone, and this is the primary tool. We can control the access for the resources, and anyone or any user, he or she want to access any resources, okay, from the cloud or from application or whatever it is the procedure. So we are, he or she need to be authenticate him or herself. So this is the means primary procedure what we are following this one. But now with the point number 4, what he is explaining, that you as a cloud engineer, you as a means employee of your company, while you are going to advise to your company, you need to see that what is the means procedure, proper procedure for the security or for the authentication mechanism is available on the cloud or not. This is the primary means component which can means help you to take the decision. So still, we are just discussing what is the authentication, and then we will see that how many different types of the authentication and what the other things related to that one. And these all things actually help us to take the decision. That's why we need to consider all of them means appropriately. Now you can see from the point number next point which is the point number 5. Here we can mention here that the authentication has the two components. So you can see further we can subdivide it, the authentication into the two different ways. Number one is the identification and number two is the verification. So once we are saying this is the authentication, but now to better understand that one, we can see that it has two parts, or it can be subdivided into the two main subgroups or in two subparts. One is known as the identification and the other one is known as the verification. Now we need to know what is the identification and what is the verification. They both, once they both are done, then only we can say, or we can understand that now only the process of authentication is done. And that is the only process of authentication, which is the only one thing. And then there are so many other things as well there. So we need to discuss them as well. So now you can see from here, to better understand what is the identification and what is the verification. If I just go back, I can show you here that the authentication has to be divided into two parts, two components, two subgroups, whatever you can call. One is the identification and the other one is the verification. So if these are the things, then we need to understand what they are and how they are different from each other. Yeah, sure, they are different from each other, but they are part of authentication. It means that they both are leading to the authentication, and that they both are very important and equally important as well. From here, so here we are discussing about the identification versus the identification versus the verification. So we need to understand first the identification in our regular process, which part is actually known as the identification and which part is actually known as the verification. So you can see from here that it mentioned that the identification is a process by which the user states who he, she is. So that is the part of the definition. Normally we use it for authentication. You remember at the start, we said what is the authentication? It means we have to authenticate that any person who is claiming or she is claiming that who am I? So we need to authenticate that exactly whatever they are claiming, they are the same person or not. But that actually goes only to the identification part, or the sub means group of the authentication, which is the identification. And then what is the verification? No worries, we can see it now that what is the verification as well. And what is the identification? We know, but which part in the process is actually the identification? So you can see from here, this is usually is the form of a username, email, and etc. So what it means? This means that this is actually in the form. Now, this is in the form. It's not the form where we input the value, but it's saying that this is normally being like a username or email. So whenever you are going to provide your authentication, always you provide the two things. One thing is your username or your email address. And the second thing is you provide, after providing this one, you are providing the password. Okay. So we are not discussing about the password at the moment. Just means keep in your mind that you are either to provide the username or your email address. That is actually your identification, because through that I'm claiming who am I. If I'm saying I'm Zaman, so I must have my ID. So the user ID, in the world of computer we can call the user ID. Suppose I have to have my email address, that is actually my ID. So I have to provide, and then system has to check that either the ID or the email, whatever it's provided, is it correct or not. Okay, so then that part is known as the identification. Now, what's the next? The system needs to verify the identity of user. So system will identify the identity of the user based on what? For example, based on the username or based on the email address. And this leads to the identification, while we are looking for the verification as well. And when we combine both of them together, then we can call that these are the authentication. So that's how Now we know about the identification, but we need to understand about the verification as well. So now we're reaching to the verification. And verification, what it means is the process by which the system checks whether the user is indeed a person stated in the identification or not. So this is the process through which we can know that who or she, he or she, what they are claiming, that is true they are or not. Okay, that's how we are checking with the help of the verification, and this process is known as the means verification process. So verification is usually done how? It is usually done with a password or the PIN. For example, I'm saying I'm Zaman. For example, I'm saying this is my email address. Now, how this is my identity? How they verify? The system will say, okay, if this is your email and this is your ID, then provide the password. I'll provide the PIN. This is my ATM card. When I'm entering in the ATM machine, so what happened? The bank is asking that, okay, means the ATM card is there. You cannot use the ATM card without the identification. Normally we can say without the authentication. So for identification, how bank can identify that I belong to that particular bank? So for that, I need the ID card. So ID card, or suppose we can see the ATM card. So if I have the ATM card, this means my identification part is done. When I insert that particular card in the ATM machine, so bank can verify that, okay, the card is valid, everything is okay. But now how the bank will be knowing that this card is representing a name XYZ? So the person who is inserting the card, that person, it means is claiming, she is claiming that I'm the XYZ. So how the machine can verify that the one who is claiming that I'm XYZ, in real it is XYZ or not? For that, machine will ask about the PIN number. That please provide the PIN number. So the one who is claiming that I'm the XYZ, if that one is really XYZ, so then in that particular case, for sure, that one will have the right PIN. So they can provide the right PIN, and then bank can done with the verification process. And once the verification process is done, it means identification is accepted. And if the identification and verification process is accepted, then that means your authentication mechanism is done. So I hope you understand now that how the authentication mechanism is actually, it is the subparts, or it is subdivided into the two subgroups. One is the identification and the other one is the verification. Now, identification, it could be a username, an email, or whatever it is. Okay. But what is the suppose verification? The verification is actually any PIN or any secret question or any password like that. Okay. Or it could be your personal information number, or it could be biometric identifier or something. A correct combination of username and passwords makes the authentication successful. So, because these both are the components of the authentication. So if we are done with this, if we are successful with both of them, identification and verification, then our authentication is going to be only done. Otherwise, it cannot be. Otherwise, it cannot be. Got it? So this is how the authentication is working. This is how the authentication is need to be understand. But now when we come, you remember that we discussed it, we have to see that how these things are working about the cloud. But this is the general aspect, or this is the general information about the authentication, that we can see that authentication can be subdivided into the two groups. One is the identification and other one is the verification. And these all, both of them are supposed to be done, execute successfully, and then only we can claim that the authentication is done. But that is general, how we can see this phenomena in the cloud computing environment. So we are going there. So this is how we are just trying to make you clear that what is the authentication and actual. So when we reach here, so here you can see Now, authorization. Now, authorization is something which comes after the authentication, because authorization cannot come first until you are done with the authentication. So anybody who is done with the authentication, then only you will have the access. For example, we again go back to the same example of the condor. So if the security personnel verify that you have a card, you have a PIN, you have identification and everything, so it means that you are done. Then he will means authorized you to enter, or he will means accept your authentication, that your authentication is accepted and you can go inside. Now, while you're going inside, now inside there are so many resources. Either you are coming in a condo, either you are going in your university. So you can see that there are so many different labs. There are so many means different offices. But you, as a computer science student, you cannot go to the labs of the pharmacy. You cannot go to the labs of the computer sciences. Sorry, medical sciences. You cannot go to the means other departments labs. Why? The reason is what? That your authentication was done already. Your authentication was actually done for the Taylor University. That is done. But now the case of authorization, that once you are done with your authentication, after that, for what resources you are authorized? You are authorized for computer science labs. You are authorized for computer science classes. You are authorized for computer science lectures, offices. You are authorized for the library. So whatever the resources you are authorized, that is the next phase after the authentication. So I hope you understand what is it mean actually the authorization. Further, you can see from here that the authorizations follows the authentication, which means that authorization cannot come before authentication. If any user who is not able as means successfully done with the authentication, then that particular user cannot go to the next level. Means he or she will be blocked at that particular portion. Now, the authorization is the process of specifying what a user is allowed to do. In other words, in simple words, we can say authorization is actually the privileges. Means these are the privileges to the users. So the user, what user has the privileges, or what users have the rights, or what user have the access, what they can do, means they are only authorized for that. That concept is known as the authorization. Further, you can see that the organizations should have a security policy. Yes, each and every organization has a security policy. In the same way, the cloud centers, they have security policy as well. And who is allowed to access which resources? In any of the organization, all resources are accessible, but all resources are not accessible by everyone. So we need to authorize them. As a faculty member. Say, for example, I'm authorized to go my office. I'm authorized to go my office, and what floor my office is. I'm authorized the keys for that. I'm authorized to go. Means you use my means the card, and then I can go. But I'm not authorized, even though if I'm a faculty member, I'm not authorized that I can go to any floor. I am not authorized that I can go to the each and every block. No, I cannot. The same way, the other faculty members or the other staff members, they are not authorized to visit to my floor. Means they need the permissions. They need the authentication. So after that, they can only go. So what it means, this is the same meaning here, that authorization is there. All of those resources are being used by someone, but everyone cannot access the all of the resources. So this is how we manage actually the security, and we manage the resources distribution. And we can say that these resources are dedicated for Mr. A, B, C, and these resources are dedicated to Mr. Z, X, Y, Z, and they can only access to their resources, while the others, they cannot use the other resources like in this way. Okay, and what they are allowed to do with those resources. So if they are able to access, then how and what they are supposed to do with those resources. Okay. Authorization policies. Authorization policies also include the privacy concerns and regulatory compliances. This is also the part of the authorization. Each department, each organization has the means different privacy policies and concerns as well. And each one of them, they are actually using means the different regulatory compliances as well. So this is how means also they are the part of the authorization. Okay, that's why you remember we always discuss that these are very important. The policies, the departmental policies, organizational policies are very important. We need to follow, everyone need to follow to manage and maintain the security. So the same thing, the same principles are for those organizations which are holding for the cloud as well. Okay. Now, what's the next? The cloud service provider should be able to enforce the user organization in the cloud-based system. So again, user organization, procedures, policies, regulatory compliances, everything means they are supposed to be followed. Only after that, we can make sure that the security is there. And any cloud which has the better security as a means a consultant or as a cloud engineer, you can only supposed to suggest that particular cloud services or that particular cloud to your organization. Now going to one step ahead, where we are discussing about the advanced authentication methods. Because up to this, what we discussed that what is the authentication and what are the other methods and what these things are. We were trying to understand these things and the concepts in general. And they were the simple normally, most of them we are using in our means daily practices as well. But now these practices are there in the cloud services as well, but because they are the common, but we are looking for something which are the advanced and important as well. So you remember at the start, we discussed that there are the few things that could be different authentication mechanisms and procedures we are supposed to use with the cloud because the reason is that cloud contain the variety of data and a huge volume of the data. So now we reach to that particular point, and while we reach here, I hope that now you are pretty much clear what is the authentication and how many components of the authentication, what is the identification, what is the verification, and what is the authorization, which comes first and how much they are important. Now we are moving towards the advanced authentication methods. For sure, these are the authentication methods which are being used in the different organizations, but they are normally mostly being used with the cloud centers or with the means cloud computing concept. So once we understand the basic things, now it will be means easy for us to understand these things as well. So what is the advanced authentication concepts? They are really very much important. How they are important? You can see from here, a simple username and a password may not be good enough in securing data application. Means this is okay, username and password, but we are saying that this is the identification and verification and then authentication done, and then we give the authorization in case if suppose user successfully log in. So we can authorize that you are authorized to this particular email box and you can go for that particular part. But that is simple. That is means very simple. We cannot only use that one to the cloud. We need the higher level of the authentication, higher level of the security as well. So for that, we can see from here that the public cloud systems can have a higher risk as the data and applications are freely available for the internet. That's what we are discussing, that this is a different environment where the data is freely available. So the risks are higher, dangers are higher. So if we consider that we only use the means password and ID, this is something not an important, and means this is we cannot consider this is means 100% secure, because they contain the several different type of the data. Now going ahead, if suppose this is not fulfilling our requirement, then what we are supposed to have, to whom we can call it, this is the advanced authentication methods. So for that we can see that this demands actually the advanced authentication methods used by the service provider. So this demands that we have to use the advanced authentication mechanisms, okay, for the service. We cannot rely only on the ID and passwords, okay, but we need to have the very advanced means type mechanisms, and those we are supposed to have, and those we are having it, okay, having it. Like suppose you can see that the two commonly used methods are known as number one, multi-factor authentication mechanism, and number two is known as the risk-based authentication mechanism. Both are very important. So we need to understand both of them, that how they are means different from each other, and how means we can uh, means how we can see that these are different from each other, and how they can means make sure that the level of the security is important, and we are able to manage that one. So see, number one is actually about the multi-factor authentication. Number two is about the risk-based authentication. First of all, we need to understand that what is the multi-factor authentication. Then the second point is that we need to understand what is the risk-based authentication mechanism. Okay, once we understand them, then only we can see that how many different types of those means multi authentication types and the risk-based authentication types are there. So I hope you know about the multi-factor authentication mechanisms, and I hope that you are a bit aware about the risk-based authentication mechanism as well. The few things we are already means in they are in our use, we are using them, but sometimes we don't know exactly that what we are using. So I will just explain to you, and you will be able to understand that what it means here, what we are means discussing about the multi-factor authentication and risk-based authentication mechanism. So in multi-factor authentication, you can see from here, this is again means can be subdivided into different components. So we can say that it is subdivided into normally three of the components. And it is essential, or it is important, that when we are using this authentication mechanism, normally we can use any one of them. But while we are using for the cloud, we are trying to use the combination of two at least. Either this and this, or either means this and this, or either this and this. So can be any, but we have to use the combination of two or more, but at least two of them we are supposed to use. But before we go there, we need to understand that what is the actually multi-factor authentication. So multi-factor authentication, you can see it's simple, like it drives the name from the multiple authentication factors. Now, what do you mean by the multiple authentication factor? You already understand, we already discussed what is the authentication. Okay, and in authentication, it is subdivided into two things. One is the identification, other is the verification. And identification is what we are saying, that like a username and password, something, or biometric something. So now what he is saying, it drives the name from the multiple authentication. So it means the identification, what we are using previously as a user ID and password, as a user email and password. But here we need to use the not only user interface, but we are not supposed to use only the username as the identification, but we are supposed to use more than one ID or more than one identification, which can do the cross verification for us. So By doing so, it means that it will reduce the chances that it can be compromised. Keep in mind, we cannot say that we can reduce the chances up to the 0% and we make sure that it is not going to be compromised. No, this is not like that. Okay. So now see here, further, the factor can be categorized of authentication. What these factors are? Three authentication factors can be. That's what we discussed. That it could be the three. Number one is what? Number one is something you know. While you are coming to the authentication, identification. So the one of the class that what it means that something you know. It means like suppose a password, your birthday, or some other personal information, or some other secret question, or some other information that is being known by you only. This could be the one. The other point is what? Something you have. Here something you know, here something you have. A one-time use token, like suppose we are using with the banks. Okay, you notice we are using the two different ways. We need to provide the user ID, then password, and then when we want to do the transaction, so it is means again and again asking us for the OTP. Why it's asking OTP? While we are already logged in, while we are already authorized that this account belongs to me, but I already authenticate myself, I already provide identification and already verification is done. That means what? Because something which is the highly importance, we are trying to means use more than the two ways. So sometimes we use more than two ways or sometimes more than two ways. So that's what the best example what we are using for the banks. Now in this way, a one-time means use token, a smart card like ATM machine. I'm saying I'm the owner for this means account. Bank is saying, okay, you are owner, but you need to give us the identification that you really belongs to this one. Okay. If I say, okay, my name is this, and this is my passport, and this is my means what we can say the identification card, bank will see, verify, everything is okay. Yes, you are right. You are correct. But now what happens if I say I want to draw the money? Bank will say, okay, how much you want the money and give it to me? No. Bank will say that you have to means let us know if you want to draw the money, either you need to present the check or either you need to present the ATM card. And once we present anything, again, they will ask for identification. If I have a check, I write a check, then I have to put the signature and again it goes for the verification. If I have ATM card, again they will ask for the identification through the PIN. And then it will again go back to the verification. So you can see the thing which is important, we have the multi-factor authentication mechanism. So it means it is not only a single level of the means verification, but it has the multi-factor authentication mechanism. So that's what we mean that in cloud normally we use the multi-factor, which can be the more than two, but at least two, sorry, at least two we are supposed to use. As I just gave you the example for the banking system right now. So now you can see from here, the third one is, sorry, a smart card are the sum of the means artifact you may have physical positions or something. Now the means this you can say like the checkbook or something. Now the third thing is something you are, something you have, something you know, something you are. What do you mean that you are? You are biometric identity. Or you are a speech pattern, face recognition, finger means thumbs. That all means goes to the biometric. So either you have the biometric or you have the speech recognition. Either you have eye recognition. So that comes under the something you have. So now in the clouds, we used to use means either three of them or at least either two of them. Randomly, anyone can be to make sure the level of security is higher. So should have at least, that's what we are mentioning here. So you can see it is mentioned here as well. Should have at least two of the three factors. Means we cannot use only the one factor. If you use the one factor, then it will be known as the simple authentication mechanism. It will not be known as the advanced authentication mechanism. And when it's not the advanced authentication mechanism, so it means a simple, and simple it means that security level will be means easily broken. So in the multi-authentication factor, it means that we have the multi-level. We can choose one means two or three, or we can choose if we are choosing the two, we can choose any one out of them. So should have at least two of the means factors that what we are using mentioned above to qualify as the multi-factor authentication. I hope you understand why we are calling this advanced, because it has the multi-level or multi-factor. So what's the benefit in this one? The benefit in this one, in case if suppose the hackers are the means any person who is trying to exploit these things, so in case if suppose they are able to pass the first level, but then they will be not able to pass the next level, this means that they will not be able to means get the transaction done. So that's why it is highly important that we have to means do this multi-factor authentication mechanism. Now, if you remember that in the advanced, the one was the multi-factor authentication mechanism. The other thing is about the risk-based authentication mechanism. This is means introduced very recently, means not a very old one, but this is very important as well. So you can see that what's the risk-based authentication? It is highly important. Highly important. What do you mean by highly important? It means that first of all, you need to understand that what's the risk-based authentication mechanism. Whenever the user is going to log in for anything, user will provide the ID and password. So for each of his attempt for logging the system, we are calculating the risk about that. Less number of the attempts, lower the risk is there. But if suppose some of the user, he or she forget the password ID, so he or she will be keep entering the ID and password, it means the level of risk is going to be higher and higher and higher. So normally, if the risk is higher, what happens? We try to suspend the authentication mechanism. Like suppose for your emails, for other things, if you provide a wrong password one time or two time or three time, system will not allow you to re-enter the password. It will give you the message that you tried, means wrongly, how many number, means this my number. Now you are not able to, you have to wait for some minutes or some hour or like suppose whatever it is. So this is how, this is the important means point we need to understand that what is the risk assessment. So this is how working, like suppose if we are accessing to the sum of the account, when you have some certain amount of the attempts and you are not able to do that, in that particular case, what happened that they stop you from even the login attempt. And they mentioned that please means wait because you already go through with the required attempts. Now you cannot further. So you can see from here that the risk-based authentication came into existence due to the increased risk faced by the public applications and websites. Because now the risk is a risk assessment is a separate thing, is a separate complete chapter. And those students who are actually in the secured software system, we cover that particular part there, that what's the risk assessment and what's the risk management and how we can do that and these things. Here, this is actually We are just, covering what is the risk. We are not going into detail because that doesn't belong to this one. But I hope that you are aware about the risk, that what is the risk. So when the risk was increasing, so it means the risk was increasing after this even multi-authentication mechanism. So in that particular case, you can test for your bank account. If suppose you provide the authentication, try to provide the wrong authentication for one time or two time or three time, system will not allow you, system will stop you from doing that. And if you're supposed to insert your ATM card and you try to provide your PIN wrongly, means it will not allow you to do this several times. But if you would do this two or more than three times, what happens? The ATM machine will catch your card, and your card will goes inside the machine, and then you will be only able to collect it from your branch. So if you are the genuine user, then you can reach to the bank branch, and you are supposed to validate yourself, and after each and every validation and verification, they will issue you the card back. So this is the risk-based assessment. Now in the risk-based assessment, what we are doing, in case if suppose user is providing the wrong attempts or the multiple attempts, then we are suspending his process of the authentication. So use a risk profile to determine whether the authentication request could be supported or not. Now maybe you are not clearly understand what this one. In case if suppose you are not doing that, what is the risk assessment? So in the risk assessment, we need to define the priority. So if suppose it's going with a higher, then it means that the risk is higher. So then it can be suspended for some time. Each authentication attempt is given a risk score. This is the way we deal in the risk assessment. We have to have the risk score actually. So how many attempts we have, it has the risk score. And if we have the multiple attempts, so it reaches to the some particular level of the what we can call the level of particular score. Once it reaches to that particular, so then the risk-based assessment method or risk-based authentication method, what it do, it will suspend the operation. It will not provide the opportunity to the user to enter the ID and password. That concept is known as the risk-based assessment. So you can see from here, if the risk score exceeds certain value, that level what we decide in some of the companies or some of the organizations or some of the banks or some of the everyone has the different. So if certain value, the service provider can request additional information before allowing the resources to access. So either it's suspend, either it will say, no, please provide this information. Are you sure you are this one? What is your mother's name? What is your secret question? And then the procedure will start. You need to verify everything. That procedure and that mechanism comes under the risk assessment. Now, the additional information could be in terms of the security questions or additional authentication information. Now, system will start asking to you the additional questions, additional information, which is related to you as a user authentication or identification, and you are supposed to provide the answers for each of them. And the moment, if suppose you are not able to provide the answers for them, then what happens? Then it means that you will not be able to continue. Whatever the procedure is later on, that is something different, but then you will be stopped by doing any next step for that. So risk is also calculated using the user and the system characteristics, such as usual login time. Okay, so when we are logging the system, it calculates how much time we are taking. Because if you are a real user, why it's taking so much time. Okay, used to access the site and access the methods and so many other things. Okay, that's why you notice that the risk assessment method is, if suppose you are using the Gmail, if you are using the Twitter, if you are using something, so what happens if suppose you are going to change your even machine or your location, you will receive a message that your account is accessed by this machine, this IP address, and please make sure, please confirm us that that is you or someone else. That is the part of the risk assessment, the risk authentication or risk-based authentication mechanism. I hope you understand now very clearly, and now it becomes simple for you. Now, if the user characteristics does not match their profile, the current risk score would means reflect the variation. In the risk-based assessment, like suppose when you are means providing your login and PI ID and you are accessing from some different resources, sometime the system will send you the authentication mechanism on your cell phone. Sometimes they send you the call. Sometimes they send you the particular number or digit. So these all things are truly important. They are the part of the risk-based authentication mechanism. I hope you understand from this one. Now, once we understand about the multi-factor, what's multi-factor authentication, what's authentication, what is identification, what is the verification, and then after the multi-factor authentication, we also discuss what's the risk-based authentication mechanism and how we do that. Now you can see from here that we are discussing about in each of the means point we were focusing about the identification and verification. So identity providers. Normally the identity provider is known as the IDP. So you can see from here, this is the identity provider is known as the IDP. So an IDP or identity provider is who is this? Is the entity that hold the identity information. Anyone can be. You remember the three things, like it could be the identity, something you are, something you have, something you know. This could be your identity. Now, IDP are now the identity providers. We will means call them from now to onward as the IDP. So IDP can be set up internally or can use a service provider. So what it mean? How you can set the IDP internally, externally, or how it can be handled by the service provider. Just wait for a couple of minutes so you will understand what it means, what we are trying to say here. Users authenticate against the IDP's credentials stores upon which IDP allows the access to user identification information. So this is the same procedure. Identification, IDPs we need to provide. Then we need to provide passwords or whatever verification process. And once it is done, then we can call that, okay, this is done. And how we can do that? We need to use the identification, and the identification could be of any type. That's what we discussed. So we need to have this one, and then we need to verify that. So IDP does more than the authentication of the user. So IDP is highly important because without IDP, you cannot get the access. Okay, identification providers. This is the most important because you have that one, and only after that you will be able to have something. Okay, now you can see that the IDP, you can see that the IDP holds the user identity information, and upon the authentication, this information can be sent to whoever needs it. Okay, so IDP holds the user identity, and that can be hold the user identity in multiple ways. Okay, and upon the authentication, this information can be sent to the whoever needs to use it. In general, the person needs it will be service provider. So it means whoever is the service provider, whoever the source that will need our identity, any identity, physical identity, biometric identity, or any of the other identity, and then they can use that particular identity, and that he or she can identify us and use that one. I hope you understand from this. So now in identity, again, how now the IDP or identity we have, but how to verify? Again, this is something in a detail like authentication. Like we have the different sources, permanent sources, and we have the temporary resources where we can use them and verify them. The permanent resources where we can verify about the IDP Our identity is the databases, okay, and the directory stores as well. And the means not permanent with the structure databases. We have other mechanisms as well. This is known as the AD. The AD is known as the Active Directory. So I hope that you know about the Active Directory. I will just explain to you about that as well. So you can see from here that the identity providers, credentials are stores, also called the user store. So where they are going to store. So this is known as the user store or authentication store. Okay, they are going to store, they are going to be stored there is where the actual user credentials are stored. That is the place where we are storing them. Two of the main type of the authentication stores are known being used IDPs are the databases and the directory stores. Database concept, I hope that you all are aware that what is the database, how we organize them, how we have the tables, how we can store them, and how we can manage them like that. And the directory stores are actually something what we are going to discuss right now, like LD, AP, AD, and these other things. What these things are, I'm just going to explain right now. So you can see from here that the database credentials are stored in the means appropriate table structures. Okay, that's why we call that is the permanent storage, and then we can verify them and we can compare the information with them. But databases are relatively easy to code, hence it is popularly used by the developer. Mostly we are using to store them in the databases. Now, the directory stores are the direct stores. This is the second part. This is what the one of the concept is the LDAP. The other one of the concept is the AD. So what is this one? LDAP. It includes the lightweight director access protocol. So LDAP is stand for lightweight director access protocol, while the AD is actually stand for the Active Directory. Now, what's Active Directory? I hope you understand. Okay, the Active Directory is actually like you have the student ID for your tailors, and then you have your password. So when you provide your student ID and password, then you are able to get access for the internet resources, get access for your times, get access for other resources. And when, as an employee, I provide my information, so then I will be able to means authorize for whatever the privileges are assigned to me. Okay, so these informations are stored in the Active Directory. The Active Directory normally resides in the Exchange server, and it being handled or it controls our mailing server as well. It can help us for the mailing as well. So you had all of these means email addresses and these things are there as well. So you can see from the Active Directory. So this is not a means that this is something different from the structured database where we have the tables and these things. So the LDAP provides the simple and standard approach to access the information from the traditional store. Okay, we can get, we have the procedures, we can get them, like suppose for your LDAP, for your access directory, you can means have the access, and you once you authorize, then you will be able to access that particular part. Those who are actually the part of, or who are actually the member of that group, of that domain particular, they will be only able to means use that particular one, and this is being handled by the AD. AD is the Active Directory. Using the AD generally requires to use the means proprietary access methods. So they provide us the access method like what we are discussing, like what we are saying. I hope you understand what is the means database and what is the directory stores. So this is how the identity providers, and we know that who means requires the identity, that is the one who is actually the service provider to us. Now, identity providers, we have many things, but we can divide them into two. One is the traditional authentication architecture. The other one is the authentication using the IDPs. Traditional authentication architecture is like any application, any authentication means store, or then we have the authentication, we have the authorization, and then we will be able to use the different features. This is known as the traditional authentication architecture. While in the authentication using IDPs, you can see from here in the IDP, we have authentication, then we have application, then we have features, then we have the means applications, and then we have features. So from here and here, the difference is what that once here we are got access, we have the access to all of the resources. But here, if suppose we are using this mechanism, once we got access, so you can see that we have the access up to the some certain level or limit. So this is how he's just trying to give you the difference for your better understanding. Going ahead, now in IDP's concept, the one important thing is known as the public IDPs. Those IDPs which are public, which means can be accepted publicly for any system. This is the important concept. So what it means that IDPs can be public or private. And this is important to understand. Okay. So now you can see that the external IDPs can save organization time and money in terms of the user management. So the few of IDPs, they are public. How they are public, you will see them. Open IDs are those not an identity by self, and it is the standard for doing the authentication mechanism. Okay. Now OpenID helps to decouple the authentication method from an application. There are so many benefits as well. But what is actually the public IDP? So just wait a minute to go to the next so I can let you know. See from here, your Google ID is your public IDP. What do you mean by the public IDP? You're going to use the Lazada, for example. Are you going to use any online service? Are you going to use the Grab service? Are you going to use your YouTube service? Okay. Are you going to log into your any social network account? So for anything, you are required to create the means profile, user profile, your ID and email and everything to complete the whole process. But if you have the public IDP, like suppose if you have the Gmail address, that is known as the public IDP. It means that those all of the systems, they ask to you either log in through providing the Gmail address or either log in through means providing the sign up form to complete that one. So if you are saying, okay, I'm just going to log in through the Gmail, so what happened? It will give the access and it will get the credentials from the database where it's stored in your Gmail account. So that's how this concept is known as the public IDs. So the one ID which can be used at the multiple means stages are multiple, service providers are multiple, like what we gave the example about the YouTube, like we gave the examples about the so many other applications as well. So the same ID you can be able to log in with them. Now, if we have an example about the Facebook, so you can see for the Facebook does not have the public ID. Okay, but it uses their different mechanism, authentication and authorization mechanisms, and Facebook provide the several APIs and SDKs that assist in integrating the Facebook login with their applications. But in the Google IDPs follows the Open ID. This is the Open ID. Okay, and this is 10, and that's why we know we call them, it is the public ID, Open ID. When you log into the YouTube, you are actually using the Google ID. So this is the one of the example about the YouTube. It means that you can log into any system, you will be able to log in and you will be able to access them. For the Microsoft account, previously they were known as the Windows Live. So you know that it is the default IDPs they used on all of the Microsoft related websites. Like suppose if you have the Microsoft ID, we cannot call it, it is public, but it's limited public. So for example, you have Microsoft ID, you can use the same Microsoft ID for your Microsoft Drive as well. You can use your same ID for your Office 365 as well. You can use your same ID to log in your team as well. So this is how, but that is only serve or work for the Microsoft group only. But the Google is different and Facebook is different. So I hope you understand what it means by the public ID. So these things are important to understand for the security of the cloud. Okay, now when we go ahead, I hope you understand this one. Now when we go ahead, So now another concept, we already discussed about the two concepts. The one which was actually, you remember, we said here the two things, the multi-factor authentication, and the second thing, it was about the risk-based authentication. Now we are going to the third point, which is really important. And these all things are we are using normally in the cloud. That is known as the federated identity. So what is that federated identity? This is truly important to understand. Okay. Before I explain to you this federated identity, I take you to the next slide and you can see from here that what it is. This is a person because being a human, you have your different identities. You have your biometric identity. You have your driving license as an identity. You have your bank account as an identity. You have your national card as an identity. You have your different digital means identities. Okay. So now each of the user has a multiple identities and means few of them they are digital and few of them they are non-digital means identities. So in federated identity, you can see that in this federated identity, in information technology, what we do is that means that linking a one person's electronic identity and attribute is stored across the multiple distinct identity management system. It means that e-identities are digital identities. If you have as a user 3, 4, 5 different digital identities, for sure they are for the different systems. Each one is for the different system. So when we are making concern, we are having more concern about security. So for example, in the cloud environment, we can use the federated identity. Like we are using your fingerprints, like we are using your biometrics, like we are using your iris recognition, like we are using your other digital means identification as well. So while we are combining the multiple, okay, but these are the combination of the different digital identifications, and that is known as the federated identity. Okay, now we can go back. Now you can see from here that what it is said, it is a secure way. It's a secure way because we consider the digital identity is the secure, but here we are trying to use the combination of that for the disparate system to get access to the user identity information. So I hope that you understand. I already explained to you from the figure. So user information will exist only in one system, and using federated identity, other systems can also have access to that information. So the other system, they can have the information for that as well. The key is the trust. Hence, the trust relation must be established. Usually, keys are exchanged to establish the trust. There are the different procedures. So what is the example for this one? We are using the Microsoft Access Control Service. That is known as the Access Control Service as the ACS. How we are using this one is a Windows Azure. I don't know that you have the means experience for this one or not. Windows Azure based service used for the identity and access.
Sir,
Yes, please.
the attendance, because it's almost 5:30.
So nice of you. So nice of you. Thank you very much. Just this is the last slide. We will just stop here because the next part, computing concept, we will continue later. Just 2 minutes, huh? But again, thankful. Thank you very much for keep remember and please remind always, huh? Thank you. So here we are. Welcome. Here we are. So this is the ACS is actually the Microsoft Access Control Service. This is with the means Windows Azure based service used for the identity and access management. And ACS can be used to provide authentication and authorization of the web. So this is the one where we are using in the combination. So ACS supports determine using the variety of the web platforms, and it can use the .NET, PHP, Java, whatever it is. So we are means stopping here. I hope that you understand. So now you only not understand it what is the authentication, but this is something very in detail. What is authentication? What is identification? what is verification, what are the different types of these, I mean, how we are going to use them, and what is the multi-factor authentication, and then what is the federated authentication mechanism, what is risk-based authentication mechanism, and these all of the things. So when we are using with the clouds, we are trying to use the combinations of these things to make sure that things are under control. So thank you very much. The computing concept and the other points we will be discussing in the next class. And I'm really happy and appreciate for your reminder about the tenants. And please do continue that one. Now, please make your cell phones ready because we know that attendance system is a problem for us. So please make your cell phones ready. I just allow me to stop the recording. Here we go. And also I need